Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About It, bringing you topics from near and far. I'm your host, Addison Levi. Thank you for tuning in. Our roundtable discussion today focuses on a pressing and somewhat controversial topic in communities these days. Are data centers beneficial for neighborhoods? We will explore how this issue not only impacts Prince George's County neighborhoods, but also our surrounding areas. Our guests joining us today are in the community fighting the good fight and actively addressing concerns. Stay tuned as we return shortly for our guest panel to discuss how data centers may impact our local communities for years to come. Thanks for joining us and welcome to Let's Talk About It, bringing guests from topics near and far. Our guests today are Staci Hartwell, a member of the Data Center Task Force, Dr. Khalil Shahid, a senior strategist, environmental equity, green finance, and economic development associate, Dr. Noah Waters, former mayor of Eagle Harbor, Maryland, and Herb Jones, president of Tantallion North Area Civic Association. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to start with the fact that data centers are often marketed as a backbone of our digital future, but critics argue that they come with a heavy environmental price tag. Can you explain how data centers affect our state of environment, Prince George's County, and why they pose a greater burden on climate, air quality, water resources, and overall sustainability?
Sure, thank you, Ms. Levi. Before I get started, I really want to just share what some of the larger takeaways are for today's conversation. The first will be around zoning and siting, like where these data centers are located. The next are ratepayer protections for air quality, for electricity, water bills, and the costly infrastructure that's associated with them. And then what are the best practices for data centers in terms of state-of-the-art construction and technology, and then also state-of-the-art technology to protect the environment. And when we talk about the environment, we're talking specifically about the demands on water resources, what it will take to provide electricity to these data centers, and how the build out of these data centers will impact the environment. And the last thing is, what viable alternatives are there to building data centers? So in terms of the environment, again, those are the things that we're concerned about around air quality, the noise issues, the demands on our natural resources and water, and what it takes to provide utility for these data centers to move forward.
Great. Starting with our second question, what are data centers, and are there different types of data centers, and why is there so much a demand for data centers today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Addison. So data centers are really the digital infrastructure or the hardware of all of our digital economy and our digital lives. So everything that we do, from our cell phones to internet, watching YouTube videos, sending an email, all of that is processed through a data center. But also everything that we produce, our phone messages, our text, our email, our pictures, are all saved and stored within these same data centers. However, what's happening now is we have a new sort of gold rush for generative AI, which is fueling the growth of what we call hyperscale data centers. So these are new model data centers. So if your basic cell phone and internet data centers are at maximum about 50 megawatts, and so 50 megawatts of electricity is enough electricity for about 10,000 households. So that's the traditional data center. These new hyperscale data centers are on a scale much more massive, and so the hyperscale data center being proposed here for Landover is about 820 to 850 megawatts of electricity. That's going to use more energy than all the people of Prince George's County put combined for a year. And so what we're seeing today is a new sort of increase in scale in these data centers, which is really driving a deeper impact on our demands for energy, the demands for water, and the potential health ramifications from the use of more fossil fuels to drive these data centers.
Sounds electrifying, if you will. Can a data center offer economic benefits to PG County? And is there any sort of evidence that says that there's any sort of impact of data centers economically? Anybody like to answer?
I would, to answer that question, opportunity costs. I guess it's an economic term. There's a better alternative to data centers, because data centers, the environmental and health impacts are astronomical. If you listen to residents of Virginia, which is the data center capital of the world, they're pleading for people to listen to us. They're saying, those living beside data centers, we can't live in our homes and we can't sell them. Medical experts are talking about the consistent noise, 24/7, it never goes away, of the impacts that lead to sleeplessness, which contribute to high blood pressure, heart disease. Young fathers and parents talking about putting their children in some type of space in the home, trying to find a space that child can sleep in to be able to function in a school. So I know there's so much talk about economic benefits, but a lot of times there's a blind eye to the quality of life impacts. Yes.
Can I add something to that too as well, Addison? So when we think about data centers as an economic development strategy, right? A data center to a local community is about as valuable as a storage facility. And I believe Prince George's County has a moratorium against building any more storage facilities because we have enough of those. And so, the economic impact of a data center, it's not going to come through jobs because once these facilities are built, they don't employ very many people. There are usually a number of jobs in the construction phase, which can be good jobs, but those are basically temporary jobs. But once it's in operation, it usually employs less than 20 to 25 people year round, and sometimes not even that. And so when we're talking about economic development, the real value of a data center and why many counties and cities are trying to attract them is through tax revenue. And so for a data center, tax revenue comes through two sources, one being sales taxes from the computer and the actual technology and the equipment, which is actually the bulk of the revenue. And the second is through property taxes, which is why these huge million square foot hyperscale data centers are really attractive to local counties because they can charge them property taxes by the square foot, and they love those things, right? But if we look at Loudoun County, for example, which, as we just said, is the data center capital, they get about $890 million in tax revenue from their data centers in Loudoun County. About 90 million of that comes from property taxes, but Loudoun has over 200 data centers. And so when you parse that out, per data center, they're getting a little bit more, a little bit less than $2 per square foot for their data centers. It's really not a lot of economic value when you square that against the cost, particularly when you think about the number of state incentives and tax breaks that are given to attract these data centers. And so that's tax revenue that's not going to the state that could be coming up to Loudoun County through other sources that they're foregoing in order to attract these data centers for, again, very little economic value and very heavy cost on environment and quality of life.
And if I can just add, it seems as if the Prince George's County Council and the leadership is looking at these data centers as a panacea to cure the economic woes. And I think you have to have more in your economic basket than just data centers to cure that, to address the economic woes, the shortfalls in budget, et cetera. This may be one way, but it's not the best way, and there are other options that they have to consider to help them.
Great. Mr. Jones, I was just about to ask you a question. How does the current county zoning regulate the impact of the locations of these said data centers?
This is a huge issue for the people I represent, for the county as a whole. Right now, there are 11 zones that are designated where data centers can be constructed. That's a concern. One of those zones are RR, which is rural residential. That means a data center can be in your neighborhood. That becomes problematic, of course, with respect to some of the environmental issues, the lighting, the noise, the emissions, and just the site and the location and the size of the data center. That would have to be changed if the county decides to go down that road. That's why it's important to have appropriate guidelines and rules in establishing appropriate zoning with a buffer for residential communities, et cetera.
Awesome. So what happens when things like power outages happen? What would backup plans be, or are there any backup plans set for power outages for these data centers?
Well, a common practice whenever there is a brownout or a blackout is, data centers have to run 24/7. So if there's no power feeding them, then they have to rely on backup generators. And these backup generators literally are the size of tractor trailer trucks or the big containers that you see on ships. They're really big, and they emit a lot of they have a lot of CO emissions. And whether they have to be tested on a regular basis to make sure that they're always working, or if there's a brownout or a blackout, they have to supplement the electricity with these diesel backup generators. So that creates a problem, for the environment, because climate change is real, and also for the impact to communities regarding their health, and not to mention the noise that is associated with them. So there are huge concerns around whenever there is a blackout or a brownout, or whenever they have to test these generators.
And oftentimes, if I can add to that, Addison, oftentimes what we've seen with many of these data centers is that they operate in complete secrecy. So there's very little transparency on how much they're actually using these generators, and how much pollution is actually being put into the atmosphere from these generators. Many times when these data centers go into local communities, they create non-disclosure agreements with the utility, with local government, so that they do not have to disclose how much energy they're using, how much water they're using, or again, how often they're having to use these generators. And so we work with communities in Memphis, Tennessee, for example, who are fighting against Elon Musk XAI Colossus supercomputer there. And there he installed, without permit, 36 of these diesel generators, which would have used more energy than the entire city of Memphis does on an annual basis. And so he was able to skirt around a loophole in the county health regulation to use these data centers for a full year, as long as if on day 365 he moved the generators to another site, he could continue to use them without any air quality permit, without having to do any reporting on how much he's using them or what he's putting into the atmosphere. And so we see that repeated in many of these communities where these data centers are going into place. And so making sure that we are upfront with our leaders to have full transparency is going to be very critical, so that we can really understand what the risks are and fight against them.
And typically, the experience of being a mayor in Eagle Harbor, we have a power plant. So when they violate standards, they typically pay a fine. That's they pay a fine, they pay for it. And so if there is some type of carcinogen in the area or some other impact, what they do is they pay the money. So.
And if I can just add, in terms of how utilities prioritize who's going to come back on first when there's an outage, because the data centers are running 24/7 and they hold so much information, they could be at the top of that priority list. So that means it'll be a little while before they get to everybody else. They usually prioritize data centers, hospitals, fire and rescue. That's how they do the protocol in terms of restoration of power. So with data centers added, they may have to look at a new protocol because they run 24/7 and they hold a lot of information, and they may consider it a higher priority.
Well, thank you guys so much. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back as we continue to discuss the impact of data centers in our communities. As we said, there are many risks to data centers, and we're continuing our discussion on backup plans or setting plans for these data centers. Would you like to talk about the heritage plan as far as?
So yes, so we understand that this is driven by a need, a deficit. The county, I understand, it's about $500 million in, a need of deficit. The state, $3 billion. So the money has to come from somewhere. There's a better alternative. Prince George's County, a lot of people don't know, Prince George's County is the only county in the history of the state of Maryland. The entire county is now a heritage area. Under the legislation passed by the County Council, CR 038-2025. So that gives Prince George's County a great opportunity for heritage tourism dollars. So far, the state of Maryland brings in about $2.4 billion that impacts economic impact to the state of Maryland through heritage tourism, which generates about $320 million of tax dollars revenue to the state. The county actually brings in, through its heritage area that's limited right now, they haven't expanded throughout the entire thing, about $36.1 million per year in economic impact to the county. So it takes a data center about 5 years to come online. If you multiply the 36 times, the 5 years, you're at over $180 million. So already you're ahead of the game. And heritage tourism will make us proud, and it can come online much sooner than the 5 year, and it will make the farmer in South County happy. It will make the young person proud of where you live. It will make no matter what ethnicity or whatever race or whatever your background is, proud of the historic gems we have. So in Brentwood, we have Sissy's Tavern. Cab Calloway played there. Brandywine, we have Wilmers Park. It was part of the Chitlin Circuit. James Brown, Aretha Franklin, list goes on and on. Eagle Harbor, Gateway, on the water to the eastern shore of Maryland. Slaves actually came directly from Africa into there. Laurel was the mill town. College Park, the oldest airport in the world. I mean, on and on. You can mention these iconic histories in Prince George's counties that can be turned monetized into dollars. That is a better way, it's a faster way, and it's economically sustainable.
And let's not forget the environment.
The environment,
yeah, there's
yes.
less toll on the environment.
Less toll on the environment,
yes.
Yes.
And to continue on talking about the risks of data centers, what happens when PG County relies on these data centers? Prince George's County, Prince George's County, what happens when we begin to rely on data centers and as an economic developmental tool? Like, what are the risks behind that?
We were talking about opportunity costs. Like, what do we give up if we usher in data centers? And there's often a false comparison made between Prince George's County and Loudoun County. Loudoun County has more square mileage and it has less people. It is not as dense. But in Prince George's County, we have more than 2 times the amount of people that they have in Loudoun County. And we have less square mileage. So what they're trying to do is to put in a data center and make the case that this will attract greater opportunity for us, when in fact it will curtail the opportunity because we are an established community, unlike they are down in Loudoun County. So they are attracting related business and industry related to data centers, but here we're already an established community. So there's less opportunity to generate that kind of opportunity for the Landover site.
What is the cost, and how will our community's electric bills be affected by these data centers?
Well, it's already been affected. The PJM, which is the governing body that really helps to determine what the rates are and what the needs will be so that we can advance these technologies, they have to forecast what the demand is going to be. So in order to prepare and to be able to meet that demand, they have already started rates have already begun to increase so they can get the money to be able to pay for it when they have to start to build out this demand in actuality. because they can't just start raising the money in that moment. They have to start way ahead of time. There's a long runway before you get to when the data center is actually built. So they're already, and I'm sure many people have heard about their electricity bills going up, and significantly. Not just modest increases, but in some cases, people's utility bills are doubling. And it's driven solely by the demand or the forecasted demand for data centers.
And if I could just add to that, and Staci is right on point, the forecasted demand, the power companies, in our case would be Pepco, did not anticipate this rush for data centers. So everybody's scrambling, trying to figure out, how do we meet this huge demand? And to the point that I think the former mayor made, the infrastructure associated with data centers, all that has to be calculated into the demand, and that goes into the cost of your bills. According to the public advocate of the state of Maryland, he anticipates those bills will increase substantially and consumers will suffer what's called rate shock. That's when you get a bill that you've never seen before in 1 month. I've experienced this myself. 3 months ago, I received a bill that was close to $700 for 30 days. I have a solar roof, I have energy efficient appliances, I have new everything. I was shocked. I was able to work it out with the company, however, but I'm able to pay that. Most consumers are not going to be able to foot that bill, and that's just a small increase. We're talking about more substantial than that. So that's the big negative side with respect to the electric rates, and the same with the water rates, because of the infrastructure related to the water that has to come in to cool the data centers on a continuing basis.
One more piece on that, Addison, that's very important as well. And so utilities are looking at this as profit for them, just to be very clear. And so when our utilities have to build out new infrastructure, new transmission line, they have to build out new power generation capacity. So they will build that transmission line, they will build that new power plant, to feed this data center, but then they will spread that cost out to all of us, right? And so whether you are rich or poor, whether you live in an apartment or a single family home, it comes out to all of us. And so, we've already seen from the increase in capacity across the grid, like really nationwide. This is a nationwide phenomenon, not just something that's impacting Prince George's County. But we've seen on average about a 7% increase. And they're anticipating that at least by 2030, we're going to see a 30% increase across the board in our utility costs. From the growth of these data centers. And let's be clear, the people who are the tech leaders who are behind this industry, they have a vision of really seeing the entire earth covered with data centers, because they believe that scaling this model up of developing generative AI, building as many data centers as possible, building as much compute as possible, is going to be the fastest way for them to develop artificial intelligence, which is going to make them more money in the long run. And so they are willing to forego any risk to our communities, any risk to our health, any risk to our social future is out the window. And so that's what we're up against here.
If I can just add, the People's Counsel, David Lapp, has introduced legislation in Annapolis that would create a situation, and this is within the BGE territory, that residential consumers, light industrial, commercials, are not to see increases in their bills as a result of data center infrastructure and costs. That's a huge advocacy position by the People's Counsel. The state regulators, and each state has a regulator, Public Service Commission or Public Utilities Commission, they're looking at this, trying to figure out how do we grapple with this monster, these data centers, how do we deal with the costs? How do we allocate those costs fairly? And as the doctor said, those costs will be spread against the entire rate base or rate customers, residential, commercial, industrial. The average residential consumer uses about 800 kWh a month, 800. This will increase that substantially. And very often with respect to rates, if you ask the companies, as you use more, your costs go up. As you use more kilowatts, your cost is higher. So this could be a serious issue of people not being able to make payments on their bills, utility service be cut off, disconnections. I mean, you have a ripple effect like you've never seen if this occurs and there are not certain protections in place.
One more thing, because this is really important, because we are also finding that in many of these local utility areas, so again, I mentioned earlier about the non-disclosure agreements, and so in many cases, what we're seeing also is utilities will often charge different rates per kilowatt hour. So if you're a residential customer, say, you may pay 50 cents per kilowatt hour. If you're a commercial or an industrial, particularly one that they prioritize, you may pay as low as 25 cents per kilowatt hour. And so even as the cost is spread across the ratepayers, these hyperscale data centers are often paying less per kilowatt hour than your residential home user is having to pay. And so there's just not fairness in the system at all.
And I think the key takeaway in this is that we are paying for billionaires to, for their shareholders, to increase profits for their shareholders. So why should we, as ratepayers, have to pay for that?
And we're becoming like guinea pigs, because this is a test. This is like a myopic or short-sighted view, because they can't prognosticate or predict the future. So we're like they used to call it the beta test with software. We're the test dummies, because they don't know the future. And as micro and nanotechnologies enhance, I mean, what we have in this phone today, it would take an entire building. So this is going to enhance, but we'll have these mammoth swaths of eyesores, these big data centers taking up so much real estate throughout the nation if these politicians keep, they buy into this and don't think of alternatives. There are better ways. There's a better way in Prince George's County to do this. It will bring more money. It'll come online faster. It does not come with the environmental impacts, and it will make voters proud.
Thank you guys so much for sitting here with me and talking about the risks and pros and cons of the data centers. I would like to thank all of our guests for taking the time to join us today to discuss such an impactful issue. We appreciate our guests' commitment in protecting and preserving the well-being of our communities and concern for the environmental impact of data centers. We wish you great success in all your endeavors to provide communities with better solutions to this matter. Let's Talk About It is here to communicate, educate, motivate, uplift, and inspire the world. I'm Addison Levi. Thanks for joining us today, and see you next time on Let's Talk About It.
Teachers are dynamic leaders, shaping a new generation, innovating how they teach to prepare students for our fast-changing world. Achieving this takes skill and expertise. They're tireless explorers, creatively discovering a universe of solutions, telling stories, experimenting, inspiring, mentoring, connecting cultures, and connecting with each other, leading by example. Experience the unique joy of helping students thrive. Teaching is a journey that shapes lives. Are you ready? Explore teaching at teach.org.